Welcome to today's Qredible live broadcast. I'm very excited to introduce you to today's guest. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about Pierre, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation. Pierre Killeen is someone who's been at the forefront of shaping policy in some of the most highly regulated industries in Canada, especially cannabis. He's a seasoned public affairs executive, a lawyer by training, and a true cannabis policy wonk. And I asked ChatGPT what that was, and I was told it was the right word to use. So you'll have to verify that.
So Pierre's wonky. Is that what you're saying?
Live, eat, breathe, sleep this stuff is what I'm told that means. With over 25 years of experience helping businesses navigate the intersection of innovation, regulation, and government, Pierre has played key roles in everything from bringing the internet into classrooms at ePals, pioneering digital public consultations at Nanos Research, to negotiating $1 billion cannabis supply agreement during his time at HEXO. HEXO. Now serving as Executive Director of the Cannabis Standards Alliance of Canada, Pierre is leading efforts to set rigorous industry standards that empower both consumers and the cannabis sector with trustworthy evidence-based information. So whether it's government relations, strategic communications, or legislative affairs, Pierre is basically a Swiss Army knife for organizations working in complex regulatory spaces. So our warmest welcomes to you. We're thrilled to have you here, Pierre.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'd have to thank ChatGPT for writing that bio.
Yes, you will.
Yeah. Is that where you got the term wonk? Because I love that.
I've always been an outsider in an insider world, Brian.
Yeah, there you go. Well, by the way, I've really been looking forward to this discussion because you are one of my favorite people in the industry. And, you and I, we hit it off the first time that we met over, I forget where we were. We were at breakfast in, was it Las Vegas? I think it was.
It was at MJ Biz, Brian.
At MJ Biz, of course, over the creme brulee French toast that my business partner still talks about. So, but we hit it off so well. And I was really intrigued at sort of your perspective of the industry, because it's really, it was balanced with a lot of your amazing background, right? So and what's led really to the formation of you forming CSAC, and so I'd like you to really talk about how that all came together and what CSAC is, and explain to our audience, why it was created.
Sure. Well, thanks, Brian and Joy. Really happy to be here. Looking forward to the next half hour together. I think we, at a foundational level, the cannabis industry is heavily regulated. So while many of us might wish that were not the case, that is the reality if we're operating in this industry that we have to understand and deal with. I recall, the first 6 months in the industry, it was very disorienting because I didn't really understand the regulatory and the legislative framework that governed how you operated in this sector. So, I've 7-8 years in it. I've got let's say my cannabis lenses that help me understand how to navigate and operate in this industry, and as well how to engage with regulators and decision makers to govern this industry. So if that makes any sense, we fast forward 7 years later, and we find ourselves in this industry with a number of, let's say, commercial and regulatory challenges. And as much as we want to say, hey, government, it's up to you to solve these problems, I think we have to be aware that we operate within a much broader context where regulators and decision makers in government have a number of competing priorities. And are really strapped to sort of respond to those. So if we want to advance our agenda, we have to look at industry self-regulation as the way to develop a shared set of rules, oversee compliance with those in order to create a business environment that is more conducive to financial sustainability of companies and social responsibility of companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think the issues in Canada, the things you're trying to solve, are not unique to Canada. I mean, we've got the same issues in the U.S. I mean, we basically face a crisis of consumer trust. And a lot of what a lot of it is, or it's not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with THC inflation and inconsistent lab testing. And it just seems like when you look at this problem, I mean, like the recent 2025 study in Health Canada, I mean, 28% had only 70 to 80% of what their advertised THC content is. And by the way, we see the same, if not bigger problems of that in the US. So where THC levels in 46 products, in Canada, were, 9 to 48% lower than labeled.
Mhm.
And then we're seeing, the problem in the US, almost bigger, right? So there seems to be this elephant in the room, and the elephant in the room to me, and you and I have had a lot of discussions about this, and you've really educated me a lot about how, the market works. And, I've learned a lot from you. And, what makes our relationship work is that, you're trying to solve the policy and, issues of the industry. And I'm saying, hey, how can we help from a technology perspective? And we just gel so well because there's a lot that could be done there. But why is there such industry resistance to telling the truth and fixing the problem? I mean, that's like the question that keeps us all up at night.
So in our, we've been working on this, and this is let's call this collective action problem. So one part of the industry acting independently is not going to solve this problem. So I think part of that reluctance is just the complexity of the problem. This is a systemic problem, and we need to bring a systemic solution to the table. So that's one, that's like one barrier to this. So I've consistently heard from people who do the right thing and who want to continue doing the right thing. If I continue, why would I continue to do the right thing or do the right thing when my competitors can keep carrying on the way they are doing and not suffer any sanction? So, Brian, you've always taught me that astute business people, they play the odds. So I think the odds of getting caught are such that, operators who, unfortunately are focused on the day-to-day or the immediate, that tends to crowd out the more longer term issues around sort of integrity or trust in the industry. Now, having said that, I think the other reason is that again, there's no easy fix. So what we've focused on over the course of the last years is building an ecosystem where we can bring a solution to market. Two, identifying what are the root causes of the issue that we can address, and I can talk about those. And three, we're just about to move into a proof of concept that will demonstrate that we can generate both accurate labeling when it comes to the cannabinoid content or major cannabinoid content in cannabis flower, as well as provide consumers with transparency and trust in products. So I think I get industry reluctance. We're very thankful for the 20 companies, both labs and operators, who've come to the table and said, we want to work together on a solution because we need, we want a level playing field. So, I get what kind of strikes me more is let's say the reluctance of regulators to act on an issue like truth in labeling. And you might be able to say, at least, and you can cut me off anytime, hey, Brian, I love to talk. Like up here, we didn't, like, our cannabis industry is regulated where the financial sustainability of the industry is not part of the regulatory mandate. Canada didn't regulate cannabis to create jobs or economic opportunity. That was never, not even part of the act. So I get when a federal regulator might say that's not our issue. It's a commercial issue. It's not our concern. We're busy. But if you look at this from the context of a medical cannabis patient, who relies on these products as therapy, or a practitioner who's trying to authorize use of one of these products, we have an issue if you can't trust what's on the label, which is unfortunately the situation. So, let's say, necessity or opportunity becomes the mother of innovation in this instance, Brian.
Yeah, and I think the problem, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head. If there's regulatory inaction, okay, then that will drive folks to play the odds more than pay the odds, right? So, and I'm not going to name names, but I do know that the brands that you're working with, and by the way, just so our audience knows, that CSAC is a nonprofit, right? So it's a nonprofit organization. So this is not like a commercial software company, or, they are a nonprofit in Canada. But I know that specifically, just talking about one of your members, and, I won't name any names, but, a very respected cannabis brand, a pretty large one, they experienced declining sales in 2023 as consumers gravitated towards the competitors' inflated claims, because they, were trying to do the right thing, very transparent, very honest. And yet, as a reward, they saw declining sales. And why? Because the regulators aren't really enacting what needs to be done in a healthy environment. And I mean, even Health Canada is not really implemented nationwide flower testing.
Yeah.
Saw some of that done in one of the provinces, but really, what was the penalty of inaction?
This is where I think our conversation is going to get really wonky, or even more wonky.
Love that term, wonky.
If you look at our regulatory tool set, okay, it is really based on, let's say, industrial age technology. We find ourselves at a time in an industry which evolves so quickly that old tool set, I have a lot of empathy for regulators, Brian, because that old tool set's never going to be able, to deal with so many of the issues and challenges that we face and I did say I was going to get wonky, to create regulations, enforceable regulations. You're talking 3 years and this is in a place where you have a functioning democracy. You know what I mean? Okay. So, and just think of how quickly this industry evolves in the space of 2 or 3 years. Like what we've talked a lot about flower, but we have our industry needs, we have a major we have a truth in labeling problem in the extract category. What's a full, where you're seeing, this is a full spectrum extract, but actually it's a blended extract, which could be 49 or 52% distillate. And because there is no oversight and frankly, no common definition of what a full spectrum extract is, these claims are being made, and you're seeing things like diamonds and sauce coming, and different kinds of products. So that old regulatory framework is really ill-suited to an industry that's as dynamic and innovative as ours. And the other thing being is that it has, this industry, and for good and for bad, has a genesis in the illicit market. So come into, and all of a sudden rules and regulations, and so I feel for to me, I'm not here saying the regulators got to act, because I get that they'll be playing whack-a-mole with this industry. They'll never get on top of this.
Yeah, okay? that makes sense to me.
And what the solution is, this sort of hybrid private-public partnership, around regulating this industry. So I think that's that's what we want to bring to the table, and that's the message we want to give to regulators and to industries. It's us working together, to develop the rules that we develop are based on industry best practices, that we have the leaders in the industry coming together that are innovating to say, these are the best practices that we can then standardize to provide a framework and an oversight mechanism that ensures compliance, so that we can protect consumers, drive innovation, drive commercial success.
I mean, that makes sense, because otherwise it's sort of like an us against them kind of play. And that's really not the way it should be. I mean, it should be a cooperative effort that creates the result. So let's talk about what CSAC has been working on, to really help in this regard.
Yeah.
Or is that secret sauce?
No, that's, no, that's so, let's go from sort of 50,000 feet to the day to day. So, we've been acutely focused on the, I call it THC shopping, because my sense is that lab shopping, basically casts the blame on labs. And if you really, our understanding of the problem is that there is responsibility and roles at both the operator level, the licensed producer level, as well as the lab level. Retailers have a role to play in this, distributors, regulators, everyone has a role to play in solving this problem. But at the level we're at here is that we have, there is no shared definition, let's say on the operator side, of how to collect a representative sample for the purposes of testing. So you think about it, a crop or a lot could be 100 kilograms, 1,000 kilograms, and 50 grams of that is going to get sent to a laboratory for analysis. So the challenge of developing a representative sample out of those 50 grams that reflect the homogeneity of the heterogeneous nature of the product, that's no mean feat. Okay. And the way that we regulated it is that we left that definition, like under our regulations in Canada, operators or producers are required to prepare a representative sample. There is no guidance. There's no standard operating procedure on how to do that. So we've spent the last 4, 5, 6 months bringing experts together from across our membership to engage in conversations about developing, let's say, best practices in sampling that can then be turned into a standard. So we've got a sampling standard for operators. On the laboratory side, okay, in working with our lab members, what they've identified is that there is frankly, there are no rules governing how samples are prepared for laboratory testing. Okay, so we've focused on that, the development of a standard for preparing a representative sample for testing cannabinoids in cannabis flower. So we've got that standard now, that basically, again, is focused on, taking making sure that the sample they use is representative of the lot of what they've been sent. So right now we're in a position where we're going to launch, we're going to run a proof of concept. We've got a design of a proof of concept that will demonstrate when these standards operate in tandem, that they can yield accurate and transparent and consistent results across multiple players. Okay, and that is going to put us in a position to basically certify products.
So just to interpret that for our audience, it means that, so when they said representative sample, that could mean a whole lot of different things to a whole lot of different companies, to a whole lot of different people, right? So you've actually put a box around representative sample and what that means.
To be proven, but yes, we have put a box around. This is frankly a step-by-step guide on how to prepare a representative sample for the purposes of testing.
Right. So that's big. That's big, right in and of itself. So what's the next step? Where do you go from here, right after that?
So once we've demonstrated that these standards work, like, Brian, we're in the laboratory, you know what I mean? And there's, so, we're going to run a proof of concept. We're going to learn some lessons. We're going to use these lessons to revise the standards. Okay. And then probably, one more test, and then we'll have a solution that we can bring to market. And what we have and our plan is to then bring these into the medical marketplace. So that provides, we are all committed to doing the right thing for medical cannabis. and medical cannabis patients. Frankly, probably most people who consume cannabis, there's a therapeutic reason there. And so that's a real, that's something that's dear to our ethos.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll bring it into the medical market. We'll start to bring certified products to patients and practitioners. The opportunity there is that the distribution and sale in the medical market in Canada it doesn't happen in dispensary settings. So you don't go to a dispensary in Canada and there's not a medical line and a rec line. It's only recreational adult use. So we can bring something into the medical market, demonstrate that consumers are looking for certified products. Because I should say, Brian and Joy, that a lot of people don't believe that consumers are looking for certified products or truth in labeling in this industry.
Say that again. I want to really dig into that. Say that again.
I had a conversation with the CEO of a major publicly listed company about what we were doing. And he said to me that given the choice between a certified product with a lower THC number and an uncertified product with a higher THC number, consumers will choose the uncertified product.
You mean the accurate THC number versus the fraudulent one? Isn't that a better way of saying it?
I wouldn't call it fraudulent, Brian. I would say mislabeled.
Okay. But I mean,
the politician in you. Yeah.
But
Soften the edges.
I think you're being kind because, first of all, it never makes sense to me why the whole conversation is always just about THC. All right. Which, is a whole nother issue because yes. I told you before, why doesn't the industry just change the dialogue? Because there's a whole lot of people out there like myself and probably some of these medical patients where the higher the THC, isn't about, all of it. It's really about other things in the product, terpenes and other cannabinoids, etc. It's almost like we think that the only thing that's of value of this plant is the THC. And maybe that makes sense to the dude that's more interested in just getting blasted. But the fact of the matter is, there's more to this product. There's product characteristics that go above and beyond, the THC. And yet we've made it such a factor in this industry that all we care about is falsifying it. So and that's it. Why?
Our conversations with, growers, leaders, OGs in this industry, they all align with your thinking on there's much more to the plant, the power of the plant than that cannabinoid. But we have to understand that the regulatory framework that constrains, that governs, the communication between an operator and a consumer has really been developed in such a way that's been a real contributor to this THC obsession. Okay, so up here, let's just look at it from a consumer perspective. You walk into a dispensary, you see a display board, and you see the names of these products, and you see the THC number. So, and then you see price. And so automatically, that's the construct with which a consumer starts to make decisions around this product. It's the wrong construct, we agree. And it's also a construct that was developed by the regulator, up here at least, given their concerns around bringing new consumers into this market. So we have this regulatory construct that's really contributed to in a major way to this problem. So then I think the second thing that we need to think about here is that we don't this is so new. Like it's kind of old to us because we've been in it, but when a historian looks at it, we've only been 7 years of legal cannabis and of legal adult use in Canada, of that consumer experience. And so we have the regulatory framework that constrains how we talk about this. And then so that's kind of stunted the development of any kind of vocabulary or any kind of language that we can use to talk to consumers about this product. So we got all these headwinds, and I think the hopefully what people will see in the solution that we're bringing to the table is one that's cognizant of the headwinds.
But it's
and
almost
provides
counterintuitive, though.
those.
And I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's almost counterintuitive, though, to me. When that Health Canada study came out, I immediately went to Reddit. I started looking at the comments that on Reddit, and and the consumers in Reddit were saying, "Oh, gee, what a surprise! THC levels are inflated. Blah blah blah." Everybody's saying the same thing. Like, they're not surprised. Like, there was nobody that said, "Oh, shock and awe!" Like, they're lying about this. It was almost like, yeah, we've come to expect that. And there was some displeasure, stated in that as well. But yet, you said that, one of these players of a large cannabis company said, well, if the choice is between, this number, or the inflated number, and the certified product, they're going to go with the inflated number. I mean, it's like, isn't that counterintuitive? Like,
So
we got a market we can't trust, but yet people are willing to accept it. I don't think so. It seems odd to me.
well, that's part of the human condition, isn't it, Brian?
Well, I guess it is. Yeah.
Well, we're engineered in such a way that we seem to be able to navigate and accept oddity regardless of it. Like, but let's sorry,
you need to put a psychologist on your board.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have had numerous conversations with leaders in this industry that discredit Reddit. They say, it's a bunch of complainers. And, you see this in our political discourse as well. There's a bunch of complainers. We don't need to listen to them. They're not the consumer. They don't represent the consumer. So the challenge we face is that the proof of the eating is in the pudding. So it's not till we have products in, like, you and I are confident in the fact that, given a choice, a consumer will want a certified product. That we see this in other industries, that deal with truth and labeling, and we kind of, we get it. So we will very shortly have the proof in our pudding that actually consumers are looking for these kinds of products. And I don't judge anyone that's not a member. I don't judge anyone that said no to us. But I do, given I'm looking forward to when we have a solution in market that consumers want to welcoming them back into the fold and bringing them into the a more transparent and trusted business environment.
Well, I mean, and I think that's really a good segue to our friends in Canada, and you are friends, right? So to our good friends in Canada that are brands and labs, how do companies get involved in membership, and how do they participate with CSAC?
Sure. We've got a website, cansac.org, CANNSAC.org. There's a join there. There's a contact us. I'm and we're findable. I think, yeah. So please reach out, and we're always happy to, hopefully you appreciate, we enjoy, wonky conversations. So we're always happy to have a chat.
Yeah. And I think, you've always been, I think what I really have always enjoyed about you is that you really talk to a lot of folks, and you've been able to get a lot of different perspectives and really bring those perspectives into what's the right solution that brings us all together. And as you said, some brands just aren't going to participate because they're not there yet. Right.
Well, thank you, Brian. And this is not, I don't want to simplify things, but when you think of this, the plant, cannabis, it's meant to bring people together in a spirit of, collaboration, relaxation, and joy. So let's try and use that spirit. Like, we got enough dividers in this world, and there's unfortunately too much dividing us in this industry. Let's respect the plant and try and, sorry to be kumbaya, but I am old. Let's get back to the essence of this and the power of this thing to bring us together. Now more than ever, we need the power of cannabis to heal and to help us deal with this massive sort of dysfunction and disruption in our societies.
Absolutely. And let's legitimize this product, once and for all. Let's legitimize this industry. So, and I think your vision is really all about that, is creating the standards. And quite frankly, I think now's the time to get involved, right? Because the way I look at it is, even if there's brands that are, reluctant to that because of the old model, there's no doubt the old model is going to change. So the question is, do you want to be part of the movement? And be part of that solution? Or do you want to be left not having a voice to the future of cannabis in Canada and elsewhere? Because I think the model you're working on up in Canada is going to apply to, emerging countries. And I think it's visionary. I think it's collaborative. I think it's fair to everybody.
And it's the solution to the problem in your neck of the woods too, Brian.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And that's, I have great interest in that because I'm a consumer down here just to the south of you. So, bottom line is, I think, take Pierre's advice, visit cansac.org and find out the way you can get involved, because the last I checked, it's really not that expensive to get involved and be part of a very important dialogue. But the work that you're doing is not done for free. I mean, it's and so you do need the membership coming in. And Pierre, I really enjoyed, the conversation. Thanks for being on. And, thanks for all the work you're doing, because, it's not like you're some big, corporate guy that's trying to, wreak money out of everybody. You've put a lot of your heart and your soul and your time and your brains, your experience and your efforts into this. And I admire you for that, because you're doing great work. And, we're always happy to talk and to support you and make sure that this initiative, this movement, and it is a movement, advances. So folks, make sure you visit cansac.org. So thanks again for joining us. And Joy, who do we have on next week on Qredible Live?
Yeah, so next week is an off week because we're waiting for the Georgia session to close, because we're going to have Judson Hill on, who I'm very excited is going to be talking to us about what went on in the Georgia session related to cannabis for legal and regulatory and all of that. So definitely tune in the week after next, and we'll hear all about what the session held.
Well, one thing I can tell you about the Georgia session, had a nice conversation this morning about this. And I talked to Jenna Murray, who's the president of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable. And we confirmed that Georgia got more letters about this issue than in the history of any other issue in Georgia. So the advocacy is working. Everybody's sort of speaking up. And I know we're waiting. Judson wanted to talk to us after that happened. So we were expecting to happen, didn't happen, so he pushed off a little bit, but we're excited to talk to him. And Pierre, thank you so much for being on Qredible Live and sharing with our audience all the great work you're doing at CanSac.
Brian, you're welcome. Joy, you're welcome. Have a lovely day, everybody.
You too.